So my name is Tyler, for those of you that don't know me. I'm on staff at Church in the City, New York, which is the church that's putting on this event. This event is the City Renewal Series. And so series means that there's been a few of these. And so this is actually our third of 4 workshops that we put on this year. And this is part of our overall City Renewal efforts, which is how we as a church plan and hope to engage the city of New York. So we just sat around and thought about it, and I sat with kind of our leadership team, and we said, you know what, we really have some amazing partners, and we have some amazing topics of conversation that were really close to our heart. And so we want to just give our church the opportunity to engage thoughtfully around how to serve the city. And so we sort of started saying, who do we know that could interact around these topics? And so if you were with us for the first one, we talked about how to engage with refugees and with immigrants in New York. And if you were here for the second one, we talked about how to interact with people with mental disabilities. And it was just a really beautiful time. And so tonight, we're here to talk about how to interact with homeless men and women in New York City. So you don't have to live in New York City long to know that this is a very present, sort of immediate issue that we all interact with as we walk around the streets of the city. And I think if you're at all like me, you've probably wrestled with this a lot on the subway train or on the streets and said, what do I do? How do I engage faithfully as a Christian? How do I not just harden my heart and just keep walking, but how do I not sort of enable dysfunction or sort of when helping hurts or any of these other sorts of things? This creates a real tension for us as we try to walk out our discipleship and as we try to engage the city. So we're here to talk about that tonight and to just think well about that and to engage that as a conversation. My hope is that this is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation for our church, and that this catalyzes a lot of action and a lot of conversation and hopefully engagement with some of the partners in the city that we've been partnering with that have been asking these questions and thinking about this for a very long time. So we don't come in with any sort of answers. We come in just saying, how do we think well about this together? And we think that this is part of our discipleship as we try to live the way of Jesus on the streets of New York City. So that's who we want to be as a community. And so some of you have been around Church in the City for a long time, so all of that language and vision is very known and normal to you, but others of you might not be that way. So that's what we want to be about. We want to practice the way of Jesus in New York, and we think that includes how we love our neighbors, especially the men and women that might not have a place to sleep tonight. So we're here to talk about that. So I'm going to do a couple things. One is, you might have noticed the little kit on your chair. We're going to talk about that later, so I just wanted to be aware of it, that there's a kit there for all of you. We're going to do so I guess the other thing is that we don't just want this to be talking. We wanted this to be sort of a full experience. So we have worship tonight. We have a time of prayer. There will be Q&A. There will be some testimonies. There will be some presentations. There will be a number of things. And we should be out of here by 9 o'clock, hopefully. And there are more cookies and coffee at the end if you want to do that. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing a couple worship songs, and then we'll go on with the night, if that's all right. Amen. So let's pray. Father God, you are the God of the vulnerable, the God of the marginalized. You are a God that invites us to be your disciples, to follow you. You're a God that brings healing. You're a God that brings life. You're a God that brings the fullness of life, God. And so I pray that as we seek to follow you, that you would speak to our hearts, speak to our minds, and equip our hands for how to serve you and how to become more like Christ in small ways, and just on street corners and on subways, and as we walk the streets of the city where you have put us, Father. Make us receptive, and may you have a word for each of us tonight, Father God. So we invite you here. In Jesus' name, amen.
Just really glad you're all here. I think as the church, as Christians, as New Yorkers, we really struggle with this concept of homelessness and how we can help. So tonight we have 3 different people that are going to come up and answer some questions that you may have, and we're also going to have a Q&A time. So first I want to bring up Gabriella Carmo from the Rescue Alliance. So I'll scoot over here, you go here. Yeah. So Gabriella also helped me coordinate this evening, so a lot of hands went into this. So like I said, Gabriella's from the Rescue Alliance, so she's just going to share a little bit with us about what the Rescue Alliance of New York City is and what they do. Yeah. So I think we've got a slide up here that has some details, their logos. So you can go ahead and take it away.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi guys.
Hey, Gabriella.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. stuck through the rain this morning. I appreciate it. Just like Lauren says, I work for Rescue Alliance. I'm a community resource coordinator. And basically, Rescue Alliance it's just a collaboration of faith-based organizations. And these organizations all kind of work together to care for our homeless neighbors. So basically, it started out about 10 years ago as an event called Don't Walk By. I don't know if you guys heard of it, but I think actually a lot of people from Church of the City actually volunteered, which we really appreciate it. But yeah, so we started off as an event that one time a year in February we would care and go out on the streets and really just care for those experiencing homelessness. And that sparked a movement, and it really created an opportunity for us to provide year-round care for our neighbors that are experiencing homelessness. So basically, yeah, we have a few different organizations that are part of Rescue Alliance. New York City Relief, Bowery Mission, New York City Rescue Mission, I don't think it's, oh, there it is, the Salvation Army, Hope for New York. So it's a few different organizations that all work together to care for our neighbors. So yeah.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. It's awesome that the Rescue Alliance, I think, is just helpful for us all to think of it as like at a 30,000 foot glance of like, you guys help to bring together all of the organizations that are already doing this, right? Some of the biggest organizations in the city, you kind of collaborate and help create events so that all these partners can work together.
Yes,
so,
and a big part of what we do is just mobilizing the church. So we really believe that the body of Christ is really the ones to make change in this city. So we want to equip you guys. We want to for you guys to learn and for you guys to learn more about how to care for your neighbors. So it's an honor and a privilege for us to be here. So thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys.
Awesome.
So next we have Craig Mays, who will come and share with us. So Craig is the Chief of Staff at the Bowery Mission. So Bowery Mission is, like we said, one of the organizations that the Rescue Alliance works with. I know that we, during City Renewal Week, many of you may have gone to the Bowery Mission to help serve. So Craig is going to come up and share a little bit about the complexities of homelessness, and also some of the solutions that we've seen with different partnerships, public and private partnerships, but different ways to kind of tackle these big issues, right? So Craig, if you want to come on up, I'll scoot over here.
Right, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
So Craig, thank you so much for coming here tonight. We really appreciate it. So I think as we talk about homelessness, there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? So we're talking about mental health. We're talking about affordable housing. We're talking about jobs. So there's a variety of factors that can lead to someone becoming homeless. So can you speak a little bit to the complexities of those different factors and how that kind of leads someone to that situation?
Sure. So it's a complex, and they told me I only have a couple minutes. So kind of figured that out. And I'm going to start my stopwatch because Josiah's going to follow me, and I know Josiah, if I go along, he's going to get violent. So I can time myself. So I'm going to wrap some information around the question, answering the question, okay? And first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I do want to say the Bowery Mission, you know, when you talk about collaboration, Rescue Alliance, we worked together for 10 years on this event, and I would call that dating. We dated for a long time. We got married in November, which means these two organizations both founded in the 1870s. So imagine that long ago. Less than a mile apart in Lower Manhattan, finally got married. So I gave up my CEO hat, and I'm Chief of Staff. We have 9 campuses, about 200 employees. It's a very amazing organization. Happy to share with you. So if someone said, if you get sick, how do you get help? Or you go to your doctor and you say, I'm sick, help me. He would want to answer you a few questions, right? Maybe take your temperature, your blood pressure. Like, what's the cure for sickness is really a stupid question, right? And yet I'll get asked questions sometimes, interviews in my role by newspapers that will say, well, we have a huge homeless problem in New York City. What's the answer? And that would be like asking the question, what's the answer for sickness? Because there's a lot of different reasons why we're sick, and the reasons point to the solutions, and they're very diverse and they're very complex. So it's really a dumb question. Your question wasn't dumb. Just gotta clarify that. Because she basically in the question said, this is complex, and it really is. In a leadership role, one of the things you can do is get isolated from actually working with the men and women. As a New Yorker, I see them just like you do every day. They're on my street corner, they're in the subway, and I encounter them, but then sometimes I can stay up in my office. So one of the things that I decided early on was that I was going to always have proximity every day in some way. And one of my favorite things is I started a men's group studying the Gospel of Matthew. So imagine going through the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor, with men who are homeless. And I can picture in my mind right now that table. I can go back 5, 6 years ago, and then we first started meeting, and I can name them. I can think about Paul, who was in the group, but something wasn't quite right, and it turned out eventually that he had dementia that was growing, and we found his family, and he's back in Dominican Republic where he was from. But at one time he was a trader on Wall Street. But he had fallen into unemployment. No one knew what was going on. And then I think about Charles, who most of us know. Charles was in that small group, and Charles and I, not too far from here, he spent 30 years in the Port Authority. 30 years, $100 a day crack habit. But he was raised in a really solid family, and when he came out of that through the relief bus, talk about collaboration, they discovered him in Chelsea, one of their outreach centers, or locations, brought him down to the mission, we welcomed him in. Well, in November, he and I ran the marathon together, every step, 26.2 miles, side by side. But that was never going to happen for Paul, or Robert, or Jose. As I think about the guys in this group, there was mental illness. There were Tom, who is still with us. He could not only not run a marathon, he can't walk around the block because he has serious liver disease, not from drinking, hepatitis when he was young. Finally caught up with him. He's unemployable. No family in the area. When he lost his job for the last time, he got evicted from his apartment. He's been on the street about 12 years with no hope. So we've been able to reach out to him and get him into, he finally got housing. After 4 years of working with him, he finally got an apartment. It's not much of an apartment, but he's now basically able to live the rest of his life with some degree of dignity. So when you think about homeless, when you think about the men and women that you will see when you even leave tonight, everyone has a story, and you can't help them unless you know the story. And most of you, Josiah's going to talk later about what do you do in the 1 minute that you have. I'm not going to talk about that, but what I'm going to say is that the long-term answers for the men and women who find themselves homeless are as different as they are. In fact, I'm going to give you a test, since this is a church group. I can't do this to non-church groups, but I want to tell you, every church group I've done this with has failed the test. But I've heard really good things about this church, so pressure's on. So you know the really well-known passage in Matthew 25. No, Josiah, you can't answer, and Brett, you guys can't answer it. Gabrielle, you can't answer it, all right? So it's a passage in Matthew 25 where Jesus, it says at the end of the age, the Son of Man is going to come in all his glory, and he's going to say, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I was sick, you visited me, etc. And they're going to say, when did we see you and do this? And he said, no, I'm going to start the verse, and you're going to pick up where I leave off, okay? And he will reply to them, whatever you did for the least of these. You all failed. I'm not kidding. I didn't hear one say it right. Did you hear one say it right?
About one.
No, I've done this to a group of pastors, and I didn't hear, where's Tyler? Yeah, I didn't hear what you said. Okay. Now, you can look this up later, but what it actually says, it's actually germane to the question that you asked me. Jesus actually said, whatever you did for one of the least of these. Now, why is that important? Because it's every individual. Do you know how many homeless there are in New York City? Just so you can answer that one.
75,000, or take a few.
All right, 75,000, okay? Do you know how to help all of them? I don't. This is what I do for my vocation. But I know how to help one. I can see Charles, 3 years now. St. Patty's Day was his 3-year anniversary. He hasn't touched anything after 30 years. And he's clean. I can see life transformation one, and then one, and then one. And when you take that approach, you realize that one size doesn't fit all. One shelter, one program isn't going to help everyone. It's taking the time to get to know their story, figure out how you can best help them, and then to try to find the resources that can speak into what they need.
That's awesome.
Okay.
That's so great. So I love that you just went right to the relational aspect. So thinking more broadly, talk to us a little bit about the partnerships that the Bowery Mission has had with organizations like you touched on it with like New York City Relief, like the Rescue Alliance. How over the years in your experience, how have those relationships gone? What are the things that work best? And what are the things that you guys are still trying to figure out?
But you know, everything, God is community himself, right? Trinity. So everything is about community, and everything is about relationship, and everything is about coming together. And church history has shown that we haven't done that very well. I mean, if you ever wonder, does God answer all my prayers? Look at Jesus' prayer in John for unity, and then look at church history. He longed to see that we would be one. So my inclination, because I grew up in fundamentalism, which we didn't like anybody except ourselves. I don't even think we liked ourselves that much. So we didn't cooperate or work with, the Methodists were going to hell and the Presbyterians were going to hell. We weren't. It was very divisive and separate. So I rebelled the opposite direction. I mean, I took an organization that had worked on its own for 145 years and I merged it with another one because the beauty is in collaboration and cooperation. And there are things that the Bowery did that we didn't do. There's things that New York City Relief does that we don't do. And when you work together, you see the beauty of God bringing different gifts and people and opportunities and abilities and skills together to really have impact. So just for example, we have women at the New York City Rescue Mission, we have women's shelter. The Bowery didn't, but they had a women's program. Meaning, if they come off the street into the ER, which we called ours became the ER, and we would do triage, we knew we had a place to refer them. Well, New York City Relief doesn't have a building. They have a bus. And they go out on the street. So they would find them and say, okay, now that we've encountered them in the street, we've heard their story, where can we take this woman or this man where they can find community that can help them? And so it's knowing what else is going on in the city. That list that was up there has grown in just the last couple of years, and it's going to keep growing. And we're also, to some degree, Gabrielle, I don't want to overstate it, but we're looking for churches that want to engage in this, not just a little check the box kind of thing, but to say, one of the main elements of the kingdom that Jesus described was that we would go after the poor. We would pursue them intentionally. So we think that we can make a huge impact in the city to the glory of God. The city is pulling their hair out. They don't know how to. There's a right to shelter here, meaning by law, anyone that's homeless has to be given a bed. So that's actually helped the homeless population to grow because they migrate from other cities to New York City because the services are here. But then we can't do more than shelter them. I think you were going to ask me a question about that. How much time?
Yeah, we're good on time. So if you
Are
want
you
to
sure?
talk, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I know, Josiah.
All right.
Don't worry, I know.
All right.
So if you want to, speak a little bit to housing and
Sure.
your experiences with that. And
Anybody struggle with rent? No? You live in New Jersey, so yeah. So this is the two things that are the most challenging for me when I think about really trying to help men and women who are homeless. And by the way, I try to really say it that way than the other way. I don't like to call someone homeless because that's not who they are. They're a man or a woman who doesn't have a home right now. And I don't even know what that would be like because I've never had one night in my life where I wasn't sure where I was going to lay my head down. So what is it like to live in that for a month, for a year, for years? But the reality is that New York City is unique in this sense. There's a couple other cities, probably parts of LA, San Francisco area, but the housing is so expensive, yet the city is driven by what we call low-wage people that have to run the bodegas and all the other things. How do they work and live in the city? And so, mental illness is the other issue, which you addressed a few weeks ago. That's a really tough thing to address among the homeless. But that and housing is really challenging. So I don't really know how to address that. I've been trying to get an appointment with the mayor because I actually have this brilliant plan. I don't, I'm just kidding. Josiah and I met with Steve Banks, who's the commissioner of homeless or social services, But they don't know themselves exactly. And as soon as they come up with a plan saying we're going to build this much affordable housing, which will bring this many off the street, it'll take us 8 years to build it, and it's going to house enough to cover 1 year's growth of homelessness. So we can't get on the other side of it. So I keep going back to the one, because otherwise I get really frustrated. Say, well, every time there's one that we help. And within the one, there are opportunities. The city shelters about 63,000 every night. By the way, about 27,000 are children in family shelters. That's the first option. If anyone flags down on police or calls 311 or 911 and says, I'm homeless, I need a place, they will take you someplace, you'll get a bed. Most of the homeless that we work with, almost all of them say they don't like staying there because and I'm not trying to be critical of the city, but they're under supervised, there's violence, there's theft, there's bed bugs. If they're not clean, they're not safe. So they really do prefer shelters like the Bowery and the New York City Rescue Mission because we try to make it feel more like a home, more like a community We work really hard to make it clean and neat and bright, but we don't have enough beds. Our total capacity, I don't even know the number now since we just merged, but our shelter, we have 230 beds, and probably with the Bowery, and we also merged with the Goodwill Rescue Mission in Newark, so we might be approaching 500 beds every night. How does that number stack up with 75,000? You see the need, it's huge. But we're pretty optimistic that together, as we collaborate and do more, the Salvation Army just joined us. If we put their numbers in there now, we're several thousand beds every night in the city. We think in the name of Jesus and the glory of God, we can love our neighbors who are poor and are homeless into health. But the housing thing, it starts with getting the job. It starts with a living wage. It starts with helping them become more employable and employable at better jobs that pay better, alongside of trying to find more affordable housing. We're in the process right now of building some transitional housing, which is at least a stopgap measure, because when they get that first job, they can get into an apartment they pay a little bit for, they learn the discipline of savings and all of that. And by the way, I'm not going to go into detail, but our programs are robust. It's a continuum of care from A to Z: job training, job development, addiction recovery, addressing mental health issues. It's all the things that underline housing we try to address, because a man or woman's not going to thrive until all those things are addressed. One last thing, I just got to get my little dig in here. Housing first. You ever heard of housing first? It works in some instances, occasionally, but it sounded so brilliant, right? If someone doesn't have a house and they're homeless, what do they need? Well, they need a home. Let's give them one. And there's actually programs across the country that are doing that. Josiah, what's the problem with that?
It's a little more complex than that.
Yeah.
You put someone in a house who has a terrible drug habit, and now you put someone with a terrible drug habit in a house.
Right, and you haven't changed anything. And who's paying for all that, by the way? Taxpayers. Anybody know what the city budget is for homelessness in New York City? Just New York City annually.
$2 million.
You're not going to believe it when I tell you the number, because everybody says it's not true, and I say go look it up, because it's public record. This year it's $2.5 billion every year out of your taxes. That's out of about an $85 billion budget. So, what is that, 4%, 5% of our budget? And the numbers are getting bigger. So,
And is that going into housing? Just that's
That's
their
just-
that's
that's
like
just
what
shelter.
they're yes.
Yep. So it's a big thing. We all know that, right? Because we see it. We see it on the street. All right. Anything else? I think I'm getting close to my
no,
time.
that was great. So say those numbers again. You said 63,000 in shelters, and 27,000 of those are children. So 63,000 and 75,000, give or take.
Yeah.
So the gap between those are those that are street homeless.
Or they're in our private shelters. Our number's not in this, not
Okay.
counted.
Got it.
Or they're sleeping
Or
in
couch crashing.
couch crashing.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to number. I think 2 of my kids are homeless right now.
Couch.
They're on my couch, or someone in Brooklyn or Queens or wherever they end up. So, yes.
That's great. Wow. Awesome. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we'll have to give them up for Thank you. Awesome. Wow. So next we're going to have Josiah come up, who, you've been speaking to. So this is Josiah. He is the Vice President of Outreach Operations at New York City Relief. We are co-workers. We work together. So Josiah is going to speak to us a little bit about the more one-on-one aspect of this, right? We just talked about the complexities and the numbers, but help us understand how God feels about the homeless and what the heart of God is in all of this.
Well, I think what Craig's talked about, Matthew 25, is sort of everything. It is, right? I mean, there's that, whatever you've done, there's the next line of that. It's, yes, that's whatever you've done to one. Then there's the, you've done it unto me. And so what I would argue is that if that's even a little bit true, then every time you engage someone who's homeless with compassion and mercy and dignity, you are actually engaging Christ himself, which takes it beyond the need for compassion to the point of gratitude. So the folks that we're serving, we actually don't want to just offer them our compassion. We want to offer them our gratitude. Because if you look at, if you actually believe this stuff that we teach in church, which is fairly significant and fairly comprehensive, if you actually believe that, then you are professing to believe that the God of the universe became a human being, suffered, and got flogged and beat up and whipped and nailed to a cross for your sake. And then if, I'm not a mathematician, I'm really not, so maybe you guys can do the math better than I can, but if that God is representative of his heart, if that's his heart is summed up in the person of Jesus, and then Jesus goes on to say that the homeless, poor, the broken, the hungry, the thirsty, the imprisoned, that when you actually engage them, you are engaging him. I believe it's an A plus B equals C situation, where if you encounter someone who is poor, who is homeless, who is hungry, who is thirsty, who is naked, who is imprisoned, who is sick, you are physically engaging the person of Christ. And if that is the embodiment of Christ, I can tell you that if Jesus in bodily form walked through the door, we wouldn't just offer him a cookie. And we wouldn't just offer him pig. We would fall to our knees and we would glorify him and say, holy, holy, holy is Lord God Almighty. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that for all the homeless people in New York, but I am suggesting that there is a correlation where if you are engaging someone who is homeless, you are doing more, they deserve more than your compassion. They might actually deserve your gratitude.
That's really good. So tell us more about that. So unpack that for us. What does that look like for someone as an individual walking down the street, right? So it's one thing to serve with an organization. Mm-hmm. We can talk about that. But what about if, I'm by myself, or, I know a lot of us that live in New York understand that there's people that you'll see regularly, right, in your neighborhoods that are struggling with homelessness, and you'll pass the same person on the street. So what does that look like to get up the courage to engage in that conversation? We mentioned that we have tonight stock and resource bags. We're hoping to give that to everyone that's attending to equip you guys to be able to have those conversations. So let's talk about what that looks like and how we can do that in a respectful way and in a helpful way.
Sure, I think it starts by recognizing that the folks who are struggling with homelessness are actually people. And once you can get over that hurdle, you can talk about how you would engage someone at the grocery store or the bank or any other place, which would be, you would probably demonstrate some measure of societally acceptable norms of engagement with a stranger. Usually you start by greeting. I know this is crazy. You would start with a greeting of some kind. It's culture appropriate to say hello or how are you. It's a wild concept, this greeting thing that we have. Eye contact is helpful, so that person knows you're actually talking to them. But at the same time, I would say that just like someone at the bank or just like someone at the grocery store, there are some acceptable practices for what would be inappropriate. So, for example, you don't typically invite a stranger you meet at the grocery store to come get a shower at your apartment. That's just sort of a strange thing to do. You don't typically start pulling out 20s and giving them to strangers at the bank. You're not like, hey, I got a couple extras. Anybody need something here? Do you just need some money here? That's a weird thing to do. It's a weird, and so I think part of the problem is that when we get so overwhelmed by the realities of homelessness and the complexities and the struggle, and I don't know what to do, that we end up doing nothing. That's usually the default. Or we end up doing way too much, which is also a problem. Because the boundaries that we set, there is some kind of, there's wisdom in understanding what's appropriate. So even you mentioned approaching someone who's, if you're by yourself and you're a diminutive female, and you're approaching this very large man who seems to be, really aggravated and angry and is really pumping his fist and yelling at the ceiling. In that situation, you may want to use wisdom in how you approach that person. Boundaries are a healthy and beautiful thing that we all practice in our day-to-day lives. But sometimes we forget that apply to folks who are dealing with homelessness. So I think using your wisdom to know, okay, is this an appropriate way to engage this person? Would I approach this person if I would meet them in any other circumstance? in this way? And the answer, I think, in some cases is no. But I think if we can get past that, then we can say, okay, wow, what can I do? And I think, again, that's where going back to this sort of what would be appropriate in terms of, hello, how are you, what's going on? And I think starting, what Craig talked a lot about relationship. I mean, how do any relationships start? So that guy who's on the street corner, you pass every day, I would challenge you to learn his name. Just start there. I mean, you don't have to worry, you don't have to solve all the problems in the world, but you could learn his name, you could find out where he's from. I think that's a good question to ask someone. That's, again, typically what we would ask someone that we meet at the grocery store or at the bank. Where are you from? And if the person, because this is the next question that people inevitably have, which is, what happens when the person asks me for money? And I say, well, what would happen if someone at the bank or the grocery store would ask you for money? You would probably be like, I don't think I'm going to do that. And that's because giving out money to a stranger is an odd way to start a relationship, depending on your profession. So I would say that, thank you. I was really hoping that would stick. Yeah, so I would say just knowing your boundaries and knowing what's appropriate and knowing that giving money is like I like to tell people that giving money to strangers is rarely the best thing to do, but at the same time I'd also say it's never the worst. The worst thing to do is just to pretend like they don't exist, and when they look at you and they acknowledge your presence, to just pretend like you don't see them. As I would much rather the church be known for stupid generosity than for ambivalence. Yeah.
That's good. So talk to us a little more about the do's and don'ts. So you said, do, introduce yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm Lauren. What's
Right.
your name? Don't give money because of the relationship that it immediately creates. If you're trying to build a relationship to help them more long term. What are some other do's and don'ts if people are just looking for practical ways?
Sure.
What if they're sleeping? What if?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, here's a great rule of thumb. Some of you have heard me say this before, but I don't know if you're on your A game when you get woken up in the morning. I certainly am not. I have a 5-year-old who doesn't sleep ever, and she wakes up bing, the world is my oyster, and I'm gonna shuck it. So that's probably not the best thing to do, is to wake up someone and hope that you're gonna get some kind of amiable response. It's not the best move. So I wouldn't wake anybody up. I would also recognize that the folks that we are talking about in terms of the issues they're dealing with, they're significant. They are literally in survival mode. And so I think it's important for you to remember that when you're engaging someone who's in survival mode, it is a little different than you're engaging someone who's not. If someone is literally drowning in the water, you don't swim up to them and just throw your arm around and expect to just be accepted, oh, this is great, we're gonna have a nice swim here. No, the person's drowning, they might take you down with them. So recognizing the person might be in survival mode might allow us to kind of give some perspective into how we engage. So I would say also it's probably not best to give out your personal information, email, phone number, address. I find, again, that's a strange way to even after a while of knowing someone for a while, it can be challenging to get that toothpaste back in the tube. And again, I would classify that under the boundaries heading, right? It's just boundaries. You're just keeping safe boundaries for you and for the protection of the person also. Because it would really stink if they had to lose a friend because they didn't behave appropriately when you were engaging them because of something that happened that made it untenable, which I've seen happen too. So I would say I would give out personal information. I would also be really intentional about asking lots of questions and also not expecting, I think some people get really worried about being lied to. I gotta tell you, if you're not gonna be giving money to someone, it really takes the pressure off on whether or not they're lying to you or not.
That's really good.
So I would say, if you're like, I'm not gonna give out money to the person, I just wanna get to know you, and they start telling you a bunch of things that you think are complete nonsense, who cares? You're not being hustled. And I think like a lot of times we think that we're like really worried about that. Like, oh my goodness, what if this person is lying to me? Well, what if you lie to yourself every day? Okay, why is it any different for this person? So I don't understand. So it's not that big of a deal. I would say just I used to really be proud of the fact that I could tell when someone was trying to like pull one over on me. And then I read 1 Corinthians 13 where it says love hopes all things. And I realized that I was not being very hopeful. I was not hoping the best of the person. I was not assuming the best. I was being cynical and I was being judgmental and I was kind of like trying to think of myself in terms of my ability to handle what the person was saying. So I would say just hope the best. Again, just give the person the benefit of the doubt. The other thing is, sometimes the stories are absolutely true. And it's staggering. And sometimes I don't know which is worse. The stories are true or the stories are lies. Because the true stories are just as devastating as the ones that aren't. So I would say just being wise about what you're doing in terms of the engagement. I would say one of the things you can do is not put your headphones in your ears and not walk around the city with your phone in your face. It's really hard to notice the people who are around you and the people who are hurting if you were completely and utterly distracted. And this is something that I really stink at. But it's just completely accurate. If you're on the subway and you are completely engrossed in your technology, it's impossible to tell who on the train might actually be hurting and who's not. And I would say you're going to miss so much if you just don't structure in time in your day to look around and keep your head up. So I would say, keep your head up. Maybe practice, it's be crazy, but practice once a week, like a technology-less commute. Where you just, okay, today's Tuesday, I'm going to go phoneless for the duration of my commute to and from work. I'm going to intentionally look around and look for people who I think are struggling, who are hurting, who are marginalized, and I'm going to acknowledge them. I'm going to smile at them. I'm going to pray for them. And that's another thing. It's crazy, but you could actually offer to pray for somebody. I know a lot of folks who we meet in the street who they survive on people's prayers. And so like your prayer, James chapter 5, I think is where it says prayer is powerful and effective. And so if homelessness is really as big an issue, as complex an issue as we know it to be, then the real solution is not even in $2-point-something billion, but it's in the prayers of God's people who are actually willing to step into that space between them and the person who's marginalized and actually do something. So prayer matters. So asking to pray. Now, if the person says yes, I'd love for you to pray for me. I would encourage you to pray, short and to the point. Don't do any sermons in your prayer. The book of Romans does not need to be exegeted for every person that you meet in the street, I promise you. And pray with your eyes open. And the other thing I would say is pray what they ask you to pray for. How condescending is it if someone asks you for prayer for something and you don't even cover what they asked for? Even if it's ridiculous. There was a woman that came to the bus in Chelsea for years and years named Ruth, who every week would ask me to pray for her pet hamsters. And dang it all, I prayed for those hamsters. Okay? Those hamsters were covered by the blood of Jesus. And she would come back and she would always thank me. And she would always be over the moon. Because when she came back, someone didn't look at her and be like, are you serious? Or someone asked you to pray for something that's completely unorthodox. Or something you just, all right, Jesus, sometimes loving the person in front of you means praying silly prayers. So I would say be open to that, be open to praying for the person, pray with your eyes open, pray quick and to the point, and on your commute, be ready. But again, also understanding boundaries. Again, just if you think to yourself, this is something I would never do for a stranger at a grocery store, maybe you shouldn't be doing it for a person on the subway. The other thing I would just mention, dudes, is with your eyes open, recognize that there may not be another passerby. What I mean by this is we read in the Bible about the Good Samaritan. We read about the people who just walk past. There are so many times where there are people in the street who are literally on the edge of death. I shared an article recently that I saw, a Washington Post article, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that there have been more homeless deaths in the street last year than there have been in years. That the toll of people who are dying in the street is going up. And there's a lot of complex reasons for that, but the fact is that if you assume that someone else will call someone else may not call. So don't be shy about calling 311 or if you think it's an emergency, actually calling 911 or contacting a police officer or letting them know, hey, there's a gentleman on the subway who I really am concerned about. He seems like he may not be doing so good. Even if you're not the one to do it, like I don't have a medical background, I don't know anything about that. My wife's a nurse, and there was a time in the bus, we were out in the street in the Bronx, and a guy was ODing in front of me. And she was amazing to have right there on site, because she was jumping right in with her nurse speak, and she ended up getting the medic there quickly, because I didn't know how to tell them to hurry without saying hurry. She used all this fancy language that got them there, like that. It was amazing. But that's not me. So like sometimes I assume because I can't do anything myself, I just hope someone else will. And I would say that Jesus gives us an example in the scriptures that is just the antithesis of what Christ followers are supposed to do. Do something. Like, don't be shy. Call. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is the medics show up, the cops show up, and the person's gone, the person's fine, and then they actually get a day where they actually get a call where they can be like, oh, cool, I actually can take 15 minutes back, and it was not an emergency. That's actually doing them a favor in some cases. But the best case scenario is that you may have just saved someone's life. So don't be shy about being that person who's like, hey, you know what? I'm a little worried about this. Maybe I should call. Now the flip side is, don't be like stupid about it. Like a homeless person doesn't constitute a crisis either. Just because there is a homeless person there doesn't mean that you should be calling 911. So just like, oh wow, there's a homeless person on the subway. No, don't. But if you genuinely are concerned for the person's like physical health, then call. But I think that comes with awareness, again, intentionality, being super, super intentional about just looking around and prayerfully seeing who God would lead into your path. That's where I start.
That's awesome. Great, so we're going to do time for Q&A now. So Craig, if you want to come back up, I'll just pop over here. So who has questions? Raise your hand for either of these guys. We'd love to hear if you have specific questions, if you've had specific encounters. I know some people in this church have. If you have specific questions, go for it. If you have general questions, go for that too.
Or just stare at us blankly. Good job.
I can start us off. Can you just talk a little bit more about just some of the immediate city services? You mentioned 311. Often these are subway interactions that are 60 to 120 seconds long, and then you might not ever see this person again, right? So what are some of the, I guess, kind of immediately actionable things that we could prepare ourselves to do in an ongoing way in terms of the interactions?
311 is a process. Part of that $2+ billion is their network of outreach teams that go out and respond to 311 calls. So part of 311 is something that you can do. It'll get an outreach team person there. I'd say another thing to do is finding out, because of the complexity of homelessness, you're probably not going to solve all of the issues in a 30-second to a minute conversation. But asking the question, are you okay? Are you doing all right? If you're concerned about the person, I think referring the person to the organizations that are represented by the Rescue Alliance is a really great starting point as well. I think there's like outreach cards that you're going to get that you can hand someone and say, hey, if you're looking for any additional resources or help along the way, these are some great programs. I know that those are really useful in those really short encounters to say, hey, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I think honesty is a really big deal. So like, for instance, even saying to the person, hey, I'm sorry, I wish I could talk to you longer, but I have an appointment, I have to run. Here's a place, like I think it's okay to say that, because you would totally say that to someone else. So it's okay to be like, hey, I actually can't spend an hour talking to you. I'd like to talk to you longer, but for now, this is all I can do. I think that's fair. I think that's a reasonable expectation on yourself and on the person.
So I'm gonna add something outside of the box. So all that's good. I have those outreach cards with me all the time because I encounter them and they want money. I don't know what they're gonna spend it on, but I'll say, listen, if you're hungry or if you need clothes or whatever, there's some places listed here at the times you can get everything you need right here. And then I always say, what's your name? I always do what you said. I mean, just to make it a human encounter, but then to put in their hands something that can be not just an immediate need that's met, but a way out. But the other thing I would say is, because I can tell from your worship that you actually believe in God, and you actually believe that He knows you and He speaks to you and you can hear His voice. So I would say be prayerful about it, because every now and then Something, you'll be led to do something different. And I just one example, I was walking by a man and he had a sign out and he wants to get a train ticket to North Carolina to be with his family. You see ones like that. Sometimes they're made up, sometimes they're not, we don't know. But I talked to him for a little bit and I felt like his story was real, and he was explaining to me how he can't get enough to quite get there, and then he ends up having to spend it for food, and so he can't get there. So I said, so I gave him $5 and God bless you. And I actually said, I lied to him. I said, I wish I could do more. That's all I can do. And I got 10 feet away, and the Holy Spirit said, you just lied to him, you could do more. That's all the cash I had, but so I went back and I said to him, I just lied to you. I said, if you want to get to North Carolina, I can get you there right now. He said, I want to go. I said, there's a subway there. I said, let's go to Port Authority, I'll get you a bus ticket. So we went up there, bought him a bus ticket. Now, if I do this every day, I'll be homeless. But I knew in that moment God was convicting me, saying, I want you to get him home. And so I waited in line with him, partly because I didn't trust him, just to make sure, see him actually get on the bus and take off. And then just to think that there was a reunion with his family. They'd been stuck here for several months in New York City. So I would just say, do all the safety things that Josiah said, but then be open to God's Spirit saying, I was waiting for someone to come by that was listening to me, because I wanted to help this man or woman, and I found someone who would listen to me. Because that's how God helps people. He doesn't. That man was praying, and God says, I'm going to answer your prayer, but I got to find someone who will listen to me. And at first it wasn't Craig. Now Craig's not listening either. And then he talked a little louder, and I listened. So.
Yeah, and even piggybacking on that, like, there are lots of times where health issues are a huge deal for people who are in the street. So I also think it's so another thing you can do if you want to be ready and be prepared for those interactions, I'd say gift cards to Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, those kinds of things can be really good, like just $5 gift cards for two reasons. One, it would get something for someone to pay for and have the dignity of actually purchasing something, and having a hot meal or a hot cup of coffee or something. It also provides rent. I don't know if you know this, but there's been something in the news lately about two gentlemen that were thrown out of Starbucks in handcuffs. Speaking of systemic issues, but one of the excuses that was given for calling the police on them was the fact that they hadn't purchased anything. And sometimes being able to put something in someone's hand and say, you can go buy a cup of coffee. It may be just to you or me a cup of coffee on our way from point A to point B. For someone in the street, that just might be point B. And that cup of coffee might get them 6 hours to put their head down and actually rest with a cup in front of them where they're not going to be disturbed or have the cops call on them. So I would say having that gift card can be a good thing to offer somebody. I would also say that if you are next to that person at Starbucks, incarnational gospel, if we live it, man. Like one time I was at Starbucks, there was a guy who was passed out on the bench. He was taking up two seats in the Starbucks, and he was out cold. And I tried to engage him. I was like, "Hey, man, you doing all right?" He totally heard me. He was pretending. But after a few minutes, I went back to my computer and I was working on stuff, and then a staff employee came. I was like, "Hey!" and started hitting him. "Hey, buddy, get out! Gotta go!" And I was sitting there, and I just happened to say, "Hey, is he bothering anybody? Is there anybody waiting for his seat?" And the employee's like, "No, but he's been here all day." I was like, honestly, I'm sitting here. I'm a paying customer. He's not bothering me. And the employee was like, all right, and he turned around and left.
Yeah.
So sometimes simply by standing in the gap, and this is something I've seen also in the street when you're walking past someone, sometimes just by standing next to somebody, you as a person who is not invisible because of homelessness, can actually make someone who is visible. So sometimes stopping and actually just standing next, and even saying the question to the person, "Hey, would it be cool if I just sat next to you for a few minutes?" Like if it's someone you get to know, is it cool if I sit here and I guarantee sitting next to that person will be so out of the box from what this world teaches us to do, that you will probably raise that person like $30 in donations in the next 5 minutes, because people will see you and then see the person. It's almost like they have like this cloak of invisibility that when someone else who's not homeless sits down next to them, it like comes off. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, there's actually a human there. Oh my goodness, I thought it was just a fire hydrant. But now that I see another human next to that human, I'm like, oh my goodness, oh wow, oh, let me give some money. And they actually put money in the cup. But that's where it's like asking the question of, hey, and again, I would even set parameters around it. I would say, hey, I have 15 minutes before my appointment. Is it cool if I just hang out with you? And they may say, go to hell. In which case, that's fine. You just keep, well, God bless you, and you just keep going. But having that awareness of asking that question can be really transformational.
Yeah, I was going to actually want to camp on that word invisible for a minute. One assignment for you. I want you to, when you go home tonight, Google, go on YouTube or Google, have the homeless become invisible. You remember that? Have the homeless become invisible. We did a social experiment. It's about 3 minutes long. We shot it on the west side in New York City, and 2 days after it was out, I was on ABC World News Tonight, Diane Sawyer, talking about it. It had such an impact. It was like 3 million views within the first day or two. Because it shows the invisibility. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's a social experiment. It's really cool. The second thing is there was a movie that was out, and it didn't do very well. It was called Time Out of Mind with Richard Gere. Anybody see it? See? Didn't do very well.
Wait, what's it called?
Time Out of Mind. He plays a homeless person. But it was shot down near the Mission, and some of the cast came in and wanted to talk to us about getting ready for the role. So I was kind of following it. When Variety magazine, Richard Gere was interviewed because they shot the movie with very little, I don't know how to call it, but they were very non-obtrusive or evident. So when you watch the movie, if you decide to see it, you hear all the ambient noise around. They didn't like filter all the sound out. So there wasn't a lot of cameras and lights and everything. So between takes, Richard Gere, with the ski cap on, the scruffy beard and clothes, was leaning on a trash barrel, and he had his cup in his side, but they weren't filming anything, and there was no camera around. And he said he realized that normally he can't stand on a street. He's still Richard Gere, but now people wanting to talk to him, take a selfie with him, autograph, and he said this went on minute after minute after minute with no one noticing him. And then he said, then I began to look, and I would see people about a half a block away would realize it's a homeless person, and they would put their head down and walk by. And he said it crushed him. He said, I felt invisible, and I began to feel what people who are in this situation feel. No one even wants to look at them. And in the article, I think he said one of his commitments is that when you see someone, a man or woman who is homeless, he will give them the dignity of eye contact. And you know why we don't do that, by the way? Because we think there's expectation. As soon as you look at them, right? Oh, they want something from me. But then you just follow what Josiah said. You say, they look at you, you say, hi, my name's Craig. What's your name? Sally. I usually follow up and say, I'm really sorry, whatever has brought you to this condition that you're here, it's got to be pretty awful. Because that's how I would normally respond to somebody I see hurting. And I'll tell you, almost never, when I start that way, do they ever ask me for anything. Suddenly they're saying, yeah, I've been here three months, and they start telling you a story. They can't believe someone actually noticed them. They're not invisible. What did Mother Teresa say? What is the greatest suffering is what? I think I'm going to misquote this or butcher it. Is to be unloved or unwanted. And that's how they feel. That's the deepest form of poverty. That's the quote. All right, we're doing a great job of taking your questions.
If you're someone who's new to helping the homeless in the city, what's the place that needs the most amount of resources right now, and where would you start?
Yeah, I would say that really depends on what. So one of the things that Craig mentioned was the continuum of care, and the fact is that there are all kinds of holes in the continuum of care. So I would suggest, just my advice, which would be, whatever it's worth, maybe not much, but I would say where, like I think it was the quote where I'm going to butcher a quote too, so that way I don't feel so. You don't feel so bad about yourself, Craig. That our calling is where God's the greatest need, and God's deepest desire to meet, converge, or something like that. So I would say, what is on your heart? What part of dealing with homelessness is sort of like really like gritty for you or for this person who's new to figuring out how they would want to invest in this issue? And I would say find the issue that really is near and dear to your heart, because it can be people in the street who are chronically homeless, who need like outreach, like New York City Relief provides, or it could be housing or transitional home or more like the Bowery provides. Or it could be maybe you're a lawyer and you really care about legal help for those who are impoverished, in which case Open Hands Legal Services is a great organization. So I would say there's no shortage of opportunity or need. The need is so broad spectrum that there's no one like, oh, that's it. Because it really depends on who you talk to. Like if you talk to the guy who's on the street, he would say, yeah, it's obviously I need housing. Well, okay, really, is that really what you need? Maybe, maybe not. If you talk to someone else who's in the family shelter or someone who's not getting a job employment, all that. So it's because of the complexity, I would say, to someone who's new to the issue, I would say, think about where your heart bleeds the most and go invest there. Because then it can be more than just a financial investment or or trying to help that particular thing, but now it's connected to your heart. And now it'll become a long-term commitment, and you'll see the benefit of the resources that you're investing in whatever else it is. So I would say just, what does your heart bleed for, and go there.
That was worth, I give you 32 cents.
Awesome!
Now I'm gonna add my 2 cents to that. So, is that, she's development, so.
Yeah.
That's an honorarium.
Yeah. I'm talking
For some of you, I know some of you right now you're engaged in this, but there's still fear or uncertainty, which is normal. So I would encourage you to volunteer with a group of people with a relief bus or at the New York City restaurant at the Bowery. And the place to start is with food, because Jesus said, when I was hungry, he gave me something to eat. When I was in that fundamentalism, we call that the social gospel. Jesus didn't say so that you could get into a program. He said, just feed people. So we feed them because that's the way, in Maslow, if you study psychology, his hierarchy of needs, and until you stabilize them, they don't care about anything else. So it's the most kind thing you can do to feed someone. So it'll get you in proximity with the homeless. You'll start learning names. You see they're funny, they're intelligent. Sometimes they're mentally ill. So it's a whole range, but they become more human. As soon as you humanize it, it's not a problem. Homelessness, I always say this, is not a problem to be solved. These are assets to be recovered in our community. And when you humanize them, the fear begins to go away. And then, what you said, like my next door neighbor, I live on 30th and Park Avenue area, and my neighbor who's not a Christian started coming down and volunteering, serving food, but he's killing it in the real estate market. That's his job. He makes a lot of money. He's really good at it. He's a great businessman, so he said, well, I think I could do more. Well, now, once a month, he comes down with the men and women who have gone through our job training, and they're ready to start interviewing, and he does mock interviews. He tells them how to dress, because he actually has bought clothes for them, and gets them ready for the interview. And of course, he follows up, and when they get the job, it's like cheering. So he started in the kitchen, but I don't want him in the kitchen, because he's got more to offer the homeless. And so you think about where this could land you, anything that you could do. Anything you do, the homeless need, at some level.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities to serve, besides what we typically think, but it's a great place to start. In the relief bus, when you hand them a hot cup of soup and a piece of bread, and you learn their name, and you give them a pair of socks, and you start getting over some of that fear, that uncertainty that you have.
It's a great question, though. Thanks.
Got a question. So this is kind of like on the flip side of someone who has been volunteering a couple of times to me, relief bus, great, just a really amazing experience. And I've done a number of times now, and now I've started to have some regulars and some friends and people who I've gotten to know. One guy, his name is Solitaire, and I think he's a little mentally ill. I think he's had childhood abuse issues, and he has addiction to painkillers because his back is always hurting. And, so I guess my question is like, you just said like, do what you can for the homeless. And I'm like, as I listen to all these people's problems and history and like their lives, I'm just like, that is just like a knot that's so tangled that, I mean, even if I quit my job and focus on this like 24/7. So what is the reality of the situation, and what is it what are we doing? Is it like this every week we're just, building some community and support, and that's all great, but like, I don't know how I'm gonna actually like help them long term.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah, that's a great question. We all struggle with it. Like, I've had to learn the really hard way, because I carry it really heavy. I mean, I've had times where we've had to turn a guy away because he's relapsed the 10th time and he brings needles in, and he goes out in the street and he's in the rain, and I go home and I can't sleep at night because I hear the rain in the window and I'm in my warm bed and he's out there. And I say to God, you know, I don't know what more I can do, and God says, you're offering what you can, which is yourself. Like, that's the gift. Like, you have to learn that you can't untangle it. Sometimes they don't want it untangled. Okay. Sometimes there's so much trauma and abuse and things in their past that it would take years of psychiatric care and everything to untangle it. But in the moment, what can you offer is yourself. And you'd be surprised because he may not say it to you, but he's going to say it to someone else. Just, what's your name?
Eric.
So he might be saying to his friends, you know, the highlight of my week is when I see Eric. Because Eric, you know, and you remember his name, you ask him questions, there's someone that he knows. I've done this long enough where I have people come back and say that to me. They say, you know what, my life is never going to get right, but your friendship means more to me than anything. You don't stop loving me when I screw up again. My life's a mess, it's always going to be a mess, but you're there. You're always there. So I want to fix everything. That's my nature. I think a lot of us are that way. We just want to fix it. A lot of this can't be fixed, but you can love.
Yeah, I would just add that you know, we have a tendency in our culture to define what success looks like. And if you define success, like at some point the line that we use to measure it runs out. So like so I would just say, like, in terms of, I try to operate on the philosophy of I'm going to do everything I can for the person that's in front of me, and I'm going to try to connect them to the continuum. And honestly, so sidebar, I would say connecting that person to someone who is able to connect that person to more holistic, long-term help. That's a big deal, because so just to take your example, like you're a volunteer at the relief bus. This person may or may not have talked to one of our staff. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe they did, they got a referral, but they never followed through. So maybe what you can do in that moment is you can advocate for that person. Be like, no, really, you should talk to one of these people. Really, you should, like, no, trust me. Like, leverage your relationship at that point, having developed some credibility, and then you be the connector between that person and the person who has the connection to maybe more holistic help. So, like, if he needs mental health assistance, or maybe he doesn't know he needs it, it's possible that we can, if you, while you're there, say, hey, I want you to talk. Now, he may say, no, I don't want to talk to that person. I'm not interested. Okay, well then you can keep coming back and you keep doing you keep showing up. There was a guy, just real quickly, there was a guy who came to the bus in the Bronx for 10 years, every week. And he didn't say anything to anybody. He'd come, he'd get a soup, he'd sit down on the sidewalk, nothing. His name was Willie. And Willie would come to the bus every week for 10 years. And he would always get his soup, he would always sit on the sidewalk, and he wouldn't talk to anyone until finally a volunteer who came regularly, volunteered a lot, went up to him and was like, my name is Gene, what's your name? And for some reason, I can't tell you why, she broke through. There was something that happened in the cosmos that no one was able to explain. This woman was like this tough Italian woman from Long Island who literally scares the crap out of me. But for some reason, she was able to pierce that exterior of, I don't want to talk to anybody, I want to help. He was in the street for 40 years. He is now blowing up my Facebook account with selfies at his apartment facility that he lives in with assisted living with other people. So like you have no way of knowing when or if. And the thing that I think we see in Christ is we see a God who is not outcomes based in his sacrifice. Like, God isn't the God who looks over the rim of heaven and goes, okay, I'll go down there and I'll die for you, but you gotta show me some ROI, kid. Like, that's just not the God we serve. That's not the God of the Bible. So God is offering his sacrifice to those who accept it and those who don't. That's just, so I would say, like, but what Jesus did was he showed up, he was faithful to the call that he was given in the midst of no guarantees of, I mean, his disciples all ditched him and abandoned him, and he still showed up. So I would say like showing up and having that, you just have no way of knowing. And I'd say, so redefining the parameters of success is a good step. And then also I would say leveraging your relationship as best you can to connect that person to holistic help. Because I'm a big believer in psychotherapy and meds and housing and housing first. I'm even not quite as negative as you are about it. I mean, I think there are genuinely, in some cases, housing first can be a great option. I'm just kidding. I know you know it's not simple as that. But I'm saying like there's
I want my money back.
no refunds. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say like just recognizing your role in the continuum. You might be at the front door, and you may even be out on the porch. Maybe you're at the front yard, like selling lemonade. But getting that person connected to the continuum of care may look different for each of you. But I'd say if you're volunteering at the Relief Bus regularly and you're making relationships, eventually you can leverage that. And if you can't, just keep showing up, because you might actually be the difference between that person living and dying.
That's good. That's good. So we have time for one more quick question. Yeah.
This is quick. Where can we get more of these cards when we run out?
Email me.
Yeah.
So, one thing I was going to say is that we're actually committed to having these on our info table at church. When everybody uses recipes.
Yeah. Great question.
Can I explain the socks real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I tell people, like I said to you guys, money is probably not the best way to start a relationship, but sometimes gifts can be. Like gifts are sometimes a good way to meet someone and break the ice. So having a new pair of socks with you at all times can be the bridge, can be the difference. And what I mean by this is the person comes up to you and says, hey, can I get $5? I need to get to, so-and-so, or I need to have such and such procedure, or it's my birthday today, whatever. And then you can say, well, your birthday was yesterday. Just kidding. Instead of saying, no, I'm not going to give you money, even though that's what Josiah said to you, I would also say you can then pivot and say, I do have a brand new pair of socks. Is that something that you would like? And I would always frame it in terms of a question. I don't assume that the person wants the socks. I would say, hey, is this something that you could benefit from? Or maybe you know someone who could benefit from this. And I would always be ready to boom, hey, I actually have a new pair of socks that I buy them new, they're not used, never been worn, and I'd love to give them to you if they would be a benefit to you or someone you know. And I guarantee 99 out of 100 people, okay, maybe it's 93, but a lot of folks who are panhandling or people who are asking for money, laundry services are not readily available. And if you're on your feet all day, your socks get really nasty. And if you get your feet get infected, it can be really problematic. So sometimes having a new, fresh pair of socks, there's even a term, there's a guy who does this Facebook or YouTube thing called Invisible People, calls them freshies. He's sponsored by Hanes, and he literally goes around and gives out socks to people. So using socks as a contact point for relationship is really, it's a really good first step. So that's why socks are a big deal.
Yeah. Great, awesome, thank you. Thanks both of you. So that is the goal of these sock and resource bags that we've given you guys to put together. One pair of socks, one resource card in a bag. You can hand it out and say, hey, there's some resources in here. If you want to pull out the resource card and say, hey, I've served with these guys before. I've been to these locations. They'll help you with anything you need. And also, here's a fresh pair of socks. So thank you both for just sharing what's on your heart. That was so good. Next we have a very special speaker. My friend Megan is going to come up. So Megan, if you want to come up. So Megan also works with me. She's the development manager at New York City Relief. Yep. And she's a close friend of mine. We also happened to match today. That was completely an accident. But Megan's quickly become part of my family. I joke that she goes to holidays at my house more than I do. So Megan, like I said, she works at New York City Relief with me. She has an incredible testimony. And she's going to share a little bit with us about that. So Megan, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And so can you just share a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. So I only have a little bit of time, so I'm going to just kind of zoom in quickly. I was born in New Jersey in the suburbs into a highly dysfunctional family. One of 7, 6 of us wound up as heroin addicts. So I just grew up in chaos through abuse and just really trying to just struggle to be a child. So I had my first daughter at 17 in high school, which is incredibly difficult. I moved out, was on my own, was doing okay. I let my older sister come stay with me for a little while. She wound up stealing a whole bunch of money. I lost my job, had nothing to like fall back on. So I asked my daughter's father if he would take her for a little while so I could figure it out. He went right away to court, and I just felt like nothing. I didn't have the foundation, like a family showing me I was worth anything before that. So I turned to drugs. That's kind of the path that my family had. It masked the pain that I endured my whole life. So that was when I was 24. I jumped in with both feet, and that was the only thing that I knew that would kind of numb it. So fast forward a little bit, I was in active addiction for like 9 months, almost a year. Had nowhere to go. I knew everything I said I would never do, I started doing. And then once I got to the point where I was like, I just can't do this anymore, I tried rehab. The dysfunction in rehab is almost as bad as on the street. So I didn't do well there. And I was from New Jersey. I came to New York, like as Craig was saying. A lot of people come to New York because there are resources here. In New Jersey, I didn't know even where to go for help. So I came to New York, wound up going through more abuse here. I got on the methadone clinic across the street from the methadone clinic. It's the Relief Bus. I actually met Josiah when he first started. One of the most important things that he did that he might not even know was he used to go out with his guitar. So all you worship leaders, you have an amazing gift. And he sang a song, and he put my name in the song, and he remembered who I was, talking to me just a few times. And the invisibleness is so real. Like, I used to walk around like not knowing who am I? Like, it didn't matter. I had a name, I didn't even know, like it didn't have any resignation with me. And then when Josiah sung my name, it was kind of like the Mary moment when Jesus was like, no, I'm not a gardener, Mary. I was like, wow, like I am a person. Like it makes you like look at everything differently. And then it's when I started to like trust a little bit. I wanted to know what was different about them. Because I went to a ton of resources. I went to so many different places. There's not as much help for women, which I kept running into wall after wall. And then Juliet, the little girl that you guys saw upstairs, she's mine. She was actually, they were talking about shelter statistics. She's one of them. She was born in a shelter, like we lived in a shelter for the first 3 years of her life. But you would never know. Like you would never know now. She's just like thrives. I kept trying to get a job. I bartended, I waitressed, everything I did, nothing I could do was enough. So you never know like where that person is. Like they could be trying with everything to just survive that day, to figure out, I don't know what to do for tomorrow, but I'm just gonna keep trying. So yeah, then I went to school. I found a really cool women's program that helped me just kind of value myself a little bit more. And I continued with the relationship. I kind of skipped over it. When I found out I was pregnant with Juliet, I made the decision that I would never have a child born addicted. And that day I walked off the methadone and quit smoking cigarettes all on the same day. but I already encountered Jesus because of the bus. And my relationship started growing and building. And I knew that if God gave me that gift of being a mom again, that I would honor him in it. And it's a miracle. I have no, like, a lot of people who have been in, like, the family chains of addiction, like, the song that you guys were singing, like, the God, like, it does do miracles. Like, he is very alive today. And it's amazing to be able to, like, have no desire to do drugs and to be able to go and to talk to people. I think it's, like, phenomenal when I get to go out and, like, have real conversations with people that I know exactly where they're at, and they give me a different credibility. So it's like, it just, here's this, like how you're saying, it goes through a little bit differently. But yeah, so the biggest thing I would say with homelessness is the isolation aspect of it. A lot of times they don't have anybody, and the people who they have next to them, they're not really rooting for them. They want to keep them right where they are because then they don't have to look at where they are. And the friendship and love, like actual genuine love, like it's, you would never think that, like, oh, let me try to go love someone who has nothing, but that's really what you should do because it's different for each person, and just to be able to, like, listen. And I knew Josiah, I saw him every Friday and Saturday. I didn't try to, like, oh, let me try to hang out with him all the time, but then there were certain people that were like, you know what? Do you want to come to church on Sunday? Like, I'll come out and I'll buy you lunch. Come to church. And it just started a different dynamic and a different friendship. And it's a very human thing. And the face of homelessness is so different, and each person has a different reason for standing where they are. So.
So thank you for sharing that. So tell us a little bit about where you are today and what you're doing and how your daughters are doing, and update us on the just the flip side of the life transformation.
Yeah. So my older daughter is almost 15, and then Juliet's almost 5. I've been completely reunited with Emily, which is awesome. Loves to come and serve with New York City Relief. Like, it's one of her favorite things. She's a teenager. She speaks a different language like teenagers do. But I'm the only believer in my family, except for my children. Like, they know God is real. They've seen it, and they're able to, like, have a different type of relationship. After I completed that school, I got to move back to New Jersey. The founders of New York City Relief are, like, my parents now. I feel like I'm, like, the ultimate orphan, but it's, like, the coolest thing ever. I get to go to Julia's for holidays. I had, like, another family come in and, like, be Juliet's actual grandparents. And 2 years ago, there was a position open at New York City Relief, and we're like, let's try this out temporarily and see if, let's just try. But God kept me there. 2 years later, I was promoted, and I just feel like He is just keep going. It's like it just keeps going.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
So Megan is going to lead us in a time of prayer. So if the worship team wants to come up, so you mentioned isolation.
Yes.
So when we talked about doing this, isolation was the first thing that came to your mind.
Yeah.
And you shared a little bit about it. But just tell us a little bit about that, and then if you want to just lead us, we're just going to have a time of corporate prayer. So Megan's going to open us, and if anybody feels led to pray out loud or to yourself, just go ahead, and then we're going to close with a couple worship songs. So just tell us a little bit about the isolation aspect, and then you can just lead us in a closing prayer. That'd be great.
So, like I said, like, the people next to you might see you, but it's still a very, like, they have a different story than you. So you really kind of feel like you're all alone in the biggest city, and then the biggest, like, to be unseen and just to feel like nobody actually cares, why should I? Is a very real thing that I feel feel like every single homeless person experiences. They don't feel their value, they don't feel their worth, and they just are unseen. And yeah, so I feel like that is one of the biggest chains of homelessness, is the feeling of, I'm just it, that's it. There's nobody that, why should anybody care about me? So I just feel like that is what should, that was the first thing I thought of to pray about, is the isolation of it. So I guess that's great. Heavenly Father, I just thank you, God. Thank you, God, so much for this opportunity to be able to come into people's lives into a different way and have them hear your heart in a different manner, God. And I just pray that every person here leaves different than they came, God. And I just pray that they look at people and that we're able to join you in breaking chains of isolation, God. I just pray that you continue to be a God of the supernatural and to just continue to break these chains, Lord. I just pray that you equip and call us, God, to just love and to see the one, because you see each one, God. And I just pray that you just use us, God, all of us.
Father, we lift up Megan and we thank you for her story, for who she is, for the blessing that she is. Thank you for sending her to inspire us and to bless us, Lord. Thank you for second chances, Lord. Thank you for third and fourth and fifth chances, for all of the grace that you lavish us with. Thank you, Father. We love you, Lord. Father, if you could help us just have a strategy of just talking to one person every day, by the end of the year we would have talked to 365 people. And just to offer them prayer and to look them in the eyes and just let them be seen, Lord. And Father, we thank you for that opportunity. And we just thank you that everybody in this church can have the power to do that through you. Thank you, Jesus, for your power.
Jesus, in the midst of brokenness and darkness, we thank you that you are hope. God, we thank you that you are light. God, we thank you that you see. You see your people, you love your people, and you hope, God, you hope. You see a hope and a future for every single person, and you love them, and you invite them, and you call them. That's among the homeless, but also us. God, you call us, you invite us into communion with you, to have the heart that you have for the homeless, Lord. That's why we're here. God, we're here because you've invited us to taste and see your heart. God, your heart for New York City, your heart for the homeless. And we thank you for that. God, we thank you that you're not a God of isolation. God, you're a God that invites. You're a God that communes. You're a God that calls forth. You're a God that sends out. You're a God that gives second chances. You're a God that sees potential and future and healing and hope. And God, I thank you, God, that you are our God. God, that we don't have to do things out of our own strength, because we can't do anything out of our own strength. But there is goodness and power in you, Jesus, and all we have to do is just lean in and depend on you and hear you. And so, God, I just thank you that we're here listening to you, that you sent all these people here to share their stories, to talk about what they're doing, what you're doing in their lives. God, I thank you for the work that you're doing in each and every one of our lives here, Lord, because you're doing something. You're doing something really great, God, and we honor you and praise you for that, Jesus. And we pray for more. God, stir up in our hearts more of what you see in us, Lord, to just be a part of what you're doing. We just want to be a part of what you're doing, Lord, and we know you will use us, Lord, so we thank you for that in advance. And we thank you that you are good, that you have good plans for each and every one of us. You have good plans for the places districts of where we are in the city, Lord, and in our jobs and whatever you're doing, you positioned us there, God, and you sent people around us to just to be light, Lord. And so I just pray, God, that we would just receive what you have for us today. We would just receive the visions and the blessings that you have for us, Lord. We love you, God. We love you. You're so good.
I want to thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I'd also like us to just say a big thank you to our guests that presented us tonight. Thank you so much for coming, for blessing us with your story, your wisdom, your expertise that has come from a life of living this out faithfully. Like I said, a few things. We are committed to having the resource cards on the info table at church, so make sure you grab a few of those. If there's ever a Sunday where we run out, we'll try to get them restocked. But we want to just kind of have a culture of embodying some of the things we've learned tonight. These talks should be online, assuming that the recording all worked out, so it's something we'll be able to share with other people in our community as well. So very excited about that. And then also, I would just really encourage you to share stories with one another, whether you email them up to us so that we can talk, whatever it is. But I'd love us to just build a culture of sharing and encouragement of what God is doing, because you just never know. You just never know what the right story, the right moment, the right time can catalyze, what it can spark in our midst. So, just the Lord's blessing over you. I'm just so thankful that you're here. So thankful that we have a church community